Day 7. The light restored. The 7th morning did not arrive all at once. It came slowly, gray at first, then silver, spreading over the water in thin bands until the rocks below the house began to take shape again. Evelyn had watched for it from the eastern window, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, gone cold long before dawn. She and Aunt Mabel had kept the light through the night. They had taken turns sitting near the window, though neither of them had truly slept. The shore light was small from above, only a steady amber point below the house, but Evelyn had not once allowed herself to look away from it for long. Each time the fog shifted or the tide struck harder against the rocks, she found it again and held her breath until she saw it was still burning. There had been sounds in the night. Once near midnight, something scraped along the stone below, slow and uneven, as though glass were being dragged over rock. Later, just before the darkest hour, there came a low knock from the seaward side of the house, not loud enough to wake the guest, but clear enough that Aunt Mabel set down her cup and turned toward the wall. Neither of them spoke of it. There are some things silence holds better than words. The lamp inside the house had burned low by morning. The hall lamp was nearly spent, the flame small and blue at its center, but it had held. The kitchen lamp had held. The little lamp beside the guest ledger had held. And below the house, the shore light had held as well. The first thing Evelyn understood when daylight finally came, the light had not gone out. The second thing she understood was that the scraps of paper had stopped appearing. No new paper waited on the sill of the blue room. Nothing had been tucked beneath a plate, slipped into the stairs, or laid between the pages of the guest ledger. The earlier fragments remained where they had been placed, gathered on the tray with the sea glass, lantern glass, the map, and the instructions, but they no longer seemed to be asking for anything. Their insistence had been quieted. After breakfast, when the guests had gone back to their ordinary complaints and ordinary pleasures, Evelyn and Aunt Mabel carried fresh oil down the old path. The ground was still damp from the previous rain, and the seagrass brushed dark against Evelyn's skirt as they descended. The cove was calmer than it had been the day before. The tide moved in its usual rhythm, the water drawing back from the rocks with a sound almost gentle enough to trust. Almost. The lantern stood where they had left it. Its glass was smoked, its metal wet with spray, and the wick had burned low, but the flame was still there, small and living inside the cloudy glass. Aunt Mabel stopped when she saw it. For a moment, all the careful strength she had carried through the week seemed to leave her face. "It stayed lit," Evelyn said. Aunt Mabel nodded, but she did not answer at once. She stepped closer, touched the lantern with the back of her fingers as if to be certain it was real, and then looked out towards the cove. "I should have known," she said. Evelyn stood beside her. Maybe no one knows until the warning comes back. Her aunt looked tired then, older than she had the day before, but not weaker, only changed by the weight of understanding something that had been waiting for her longer than she had realized. Together they cleaned the glass, trimmed what remained of the wick, and filled the lantern again. The work was plain and practical, and that made it feel solemn. There was no ceremony to it, no grand speech spoken over the rocks, no full explanation rising out of the tide, only two women tending a light because a warning had returned and the old instruction had told them what must be done. The light was kept. That was all the paper had asked. That was enough. By afternoon, Aunt Mabel had found stronger wire, a better hook, and an old iron bracket from the shed. Evelyn carried down a cloth, oil, matches, and the folded map, though they no longer needed it to find the place. The route had already begun to feel known beneath their feet. They fixed the lantern more securely before evening. It was not restored exactly as it had once been. Too much had been lost for that. The old post was gone. The original frame had rotted away. Whatever hands had first built the warning place were long past naming. But the lantern stood where the map had marked it, above the rocks and facing the darkening water, and its purpose had been remembered. As dusk drew near, the guests gathered in the dining room for supper. Their voices drifted through the hall while Aunt Mabel checked the oil and Evelyn folded the cloth around the matchbox. Forks touched plates. Chairs scraped lightly against the floor. Somewhere beyond the kitchen door, a laugh rose and fell. For the first time in days, Evelyn did not resent those familiar sounds. They seemed worth protecting. Neither she nor Aunt Mabel said so aloud. They only gathered what was needed and slipped out through the back door before the last of the daylight left the windows. The old path was dim beneath the evening sky. Grass brushed against Evelyn's skirt as they made their way down towards the rocks, and below them the cove moved in its slow, dark rhythm. The lantern waited where they had fixed it, its glass cloudy, its metal damp with salt air. Aunt Mabel handed Evelyn the matchbox. "You light it," she said. Evelyn looked at her surprised. Her aunt's expression softened, though only a little. "You found the first piece." The match flared bright, then steadied. Evelyn cupped it carefully against the damp air and touched it to the wick. This time the flame caught more easily, as if the lantern remembered what it was meant to do. A small gold light filled the glass, faint at first, then stronger. Below them the water moved against the rocks. Above them the house waited. Nothing dramatic happened. No shape fled from the shore. No voice rose from the fog. No secret opened itself and gave them the answers they had not been given. But the air changed. The pressure that had gathered around the house all week eased by degrees. The windows no longer seemed to hold back something pressing from the outside. The old boards settled. The cove, though still darkening with evening, no longer felt as if it was pushing towards them. Something had drawn near. Something had found the light kept, and for now something had withdrawn. When they returned to the house, Aunt Mabel lit the front hall lamp, as she always did. This time, Evelyn understood it was not a foolish habit or a nervous superstition. It was a remembrance. It was a practice. It was one small act repeated because someone, long ago, had known it mattered. The tray of fragments remained on the kitchen table. Evelyn looked over them once more. The sea glass, the torn warning scrap, the ledger strip, the lantern glass, the map, and the instructions. Together, they had brought the old knowing back, piece by piece. They had not explained everything, but perhaps they had never meant to. Some warnings are not stories. Some warnings are only meant to be answered. That night, Widow's Cove settled into a quieter stillness. The guests went to their rooms. The lamps inside the house burned low. The guest ledger lay closed in the hall, and the tide moved in and out below as it had done long before the house was built, and would go on doing long after every name in the ledger had faded. At the eastern window, Evelyn watched the shore light burn. It did not erase the dark beyond the cove. It held it back. For now, that was enough, because the tide keeps its own secrets, and what has once been held at bay does not always remain so willingly. And that brings us to the end of our time at Widow's Cove. And like many good mysteries, not every question has been answered. We still don't know exactly what waited beyond the tide, or why the old light was needed in the first place. Some things at Widow's Cove may always stay tucked away in the fog, but what we do know is that Evelyn and Aunt Mabel listened to the warning. They followed the clues one piece at a time. and they restored the light. And now they're safe. Whatever had begun pressing in from beyond the cove has been held back, at least for this night. I hope you've enjoyed following along with this little mystery as much as I've enjoyed sharing it with you. Thank you for spending this week with me and for crafting along and bringing your own pieces of Widow's Cove to life. So for now, we'll say goodbye to the old boarding house, that rocky shore, and the little lantern that burns against the dark. But who knows? Widow's Cove does not seem like the kind of place that gives up all its secrets at once. For now, the ladies are safe, the lantern is lit, and whatever waits beyond the tide has been held back, at least for now. So until I see y'all again here in the attic, y'all take care.